So I decided to join the Polish army. That's right, after 16 years of living in Poland, I came in October 2010. Feels like a long time ago now. And after 6 and maybe a bit years of being a Polish citizen, I'm now fulfilling a lifelong dream. My whole life, I guess, in a way, ever since I was a young boy, of being in the army. I have to admit, though, that when I was a young boy, I never thought it would ever be in the Polish army. But nonetheless, it is a dream because I even found a letter that I wrote to the Polish then Minister of Defense, Antoni Macierewicz, in 2017, basically begging him to join the Polish Territorial Army, even though I wasn't at the time a Polish citizen. So this is the realization of at least 16 years of living in Poland. Now, one of the reasons that I'm doing this is because I want to go into the army on my own terms. So this may come as a surprise to anyone who became a Polish citizen, but if you've read your constitution, it's up there on my shelf right now. You know that Article 85 in the time of war means that you have to get conscripted. And I'd rather go into the Polish army or the Territorial army, I'll talk about that in a second, on my own terms. I'd rather get trained and have everything sorted just in case anything bad happens, which I'll talk about that in a second. So actually, I don't think it's very likely that Russia's going to invade Poland. We could do a whole video about that. I think it's unlikely. It's more possible than it ever has been, and it's certainly more probable than it was. But there's lots of different reasons why it would be complete suicide for Putin, not least of which, of course, Poland is part of NATO's Article 5. So my decision to join the Polish army has got nothing really to do with the potential risk from Russia. It's not why I'm joining. Although, as the Poles say, walczyć z Niemcami to obowiązek, bić bolszewików to przyjemność. So to fight with Germans is a bit of a duty, but to beat the Bolshevik is a pleasure. All I can say is I'm totally down with that vibe. So I'll tell you in a second about a little disaster I've had, but right now I want to talk to you about what's happening to me in the next 10 weeks. So in 10 weeks' time, I will be going into the Polish army, into the Polish Territorial Army, so WOT it's called, Wojsko Obrony Terytorialne. Back in the day, this was derided by politicians as being basically Macierewicz's little private militia, but it's actually become, I think, a pretty successful part of the Polish army apparatus. I don't know how it compares to the Territorial Army in the UK or the National Guard in the US in terms of size. I know from friends that I have in both the Polish army and WOT as well that everybody says that the Polish army is still kind of that 1970s-ish organization, you know, very Soviet Union-y. No offense, obviously, to all my friends in the Polish army, but they've been telling me that. Whereas the equipment and some of the training and just basically the ethos within WOT is a little bit more modern. So apparently WOT gets some of the best kit. And the reason why WOT exists is it's precisely for people like me. I'm self-employed. I don't work for anyone on a like an employee contract. And WOT basically, there's multiple different variations you can do. WOT is basically a 16-day basic training. So it's the Army's Dobrowolna Służba Wojskowa. So that's like the voluntary month where you do a month of training. You can do that in the Polish Army, WP, Wojsko Polskie. It's basically that, but in 16 days. Now, I've heard all sorts of different things about this training, okay? From total horror story, it's going to look like Full Metal Jacket with people screaming in your face, to other people telling me that they actually detrained because they weren't doing enough exercise over the course of those 16 days. A lot of people have told me, like, you're going to lose all your enthusiasm to the army, to which I say, I haven't got that much enthusiasm, okay? I'm not 19, I'm 43. It's not going to be a surprise for me if I have to eat some SH1T and if it's basic and way more basic than some of the stuff I've already been doing, which I'll tell you about in a minute. So you've got a 16-day training, and then after that, if you stay within WOT, and I'm going to see how it goes, but you then have basically one weekend every single month, and then you can get called up. Most of the time, WOT's been used for civil emergencies. I believe some WOT units have been sent to the border as well, that kind of thing. After a year of basic work within WOT, you can then go into a specialization. Now, I've had a lot of questions about people saying, can they join WOT, or the Polish army? Basically, the most important thing you need to know is that unless you're a Polish citizen, you can't. Now, I Googled for a bit, okay? I did my research. There's something like 250 Polish soldiers in the whole Polish army with joint citizenship. But as far as I know, I'm the first foreign person to have actually become a Polish citizen, now going into the Polish army with the Territorial Army as well. So I'm kind of charting uncharted territory here. However, if you know your Polish history, you know there's been plenty of occasions when foreigners have come into the Polish army and served honorably na rzecz Polski, so for the Polish cause. Right behind me, I have a whole bunch of Polish history books behind me. I don't know, 60, 70 maybe. There's a book by Ron Jeffries, for example, who was a British guy who served in the Armia Krajowa. Incredible story during World War II. So I'm not the first, okay? Let's not make any claim to that. But as far as I know, I'm the first person to do it this way. But you absolutely have to be a Polish citizen. The other requirements are pretty simple. Like, I think it's 18 to 60, maybe 65. I can't quite remember. I'm not sure if I'd want to be doing this at 65. I'm 43 at the moment. I can feel in my bones the difference. You obviously can't be a criminal. You can't have criminal convictions, I believe, anything recent at least, or anything really, really serious. And you have to be of sound psychological and physiological status. So I'm going to tell you in a second about what it was like when I went through the psychology and the doctor's exam, because it was kind of wild. But first, before we get there, I want to talk about some of the physical requirements. There's a basic Army physical test. I was chatting to a guy who was in the American Army, and it turns out it's exactly the same as the American Army. So I'm pretty certain that this is basically a copy of the Americans. You have to be able to run 3 kilometers. You have to do as many press-ups as you can in 2 minutes, and you have to do as many sit-ups as you can in 2 minutes. And basically, depending on your age, there's like a higher and a lower kind of number, you know, what's basically the top possible score and what's the lowest score. So for the last, what are we now? Like for the last 7 or 8 months, ever since I knew I was going to go into the basic training this September, I've been training pretty hard on all those fronts. I was already pretty physically fit already. I did a lot of CrossFit, a lot of gym work, a lot of running, some biking, a bit of swimming. So I reckon I'm in pretty good shape. But actually doing sit-ups, right? Nobody does sit-ups anymore. So that was kind of like a brutal experience. The first time I did it, I think I did something like 20 or maybe 35 sit-ups in 2 minutes. For my age range, the upper limit is 60. I ain't gonna get to 60, I already know that. I haven't trained the sit-ups as much as I should have done. I've done them quite regularly every single week. Push-ups, press-ups, depending on where you're from, I think I could do maybe 35, 40, bang out, no problem, that would be fine. For the running I've made the most progress. So the upper limit, the fastest I think you can do it at my age, so kind of 40 to 50 age bracket, is 12 minutes 40. And at the moment I'm running that 11 minutes 46. So I'm exceeding that. There's some other ones, there's things like pull-ups you can do. I've got a problem basically with my pull-ups. I'll tell you about that in a second. There's also like a bieg wahadłowy where you have to do a 10-minute sprint back and forth between 2 posts. I also did that within 29 seconds, so within the 30-second, like basically the top speed. So if you can do those things, if you're a Polish citizen, you can also be in the Polish Army. Now, this isn't my first contact either with the Army or basically with military affairs. My whole life I've been studying the military in different forms. You guys know, if you've been watching my films in the past, that I'm just obsessed with military history. I always have been. I almost joined the British Army back in 2001 or 2000, 26 years ago. I had the paperwork, I filled it in, I didn't sign. Basically a pretty simple reason. I just enjoyed being at university too much and I didn't want to give up my weekends, if you know what I mean. And so I never did join the British Army, and you know, who knows what would have happened to me if I did, because this was pre-September 11th, if you can imagine that. So Afghanistan and Iran would have happened, and that might have been an interesting time. So as I said earlier, I'm fulfilling that dream now. Just before Ukraine was invaded by Russia, about 6 months before, I started to see which direction we were going. By the way, with everyone going like, oh, NATO warning about Russia attacking NATO, what a load of bullshit. Well, I mean, if you go back, that's exactly what NATO were doing. Very aggressive briefing just before Russia invaded Ukraine. And everybody said that was nonsense. And the Russian bots were going into overdrive. And then it actually happened. So I err on the side of maybe trusting whatever information, whatever spies, whatever human intelligence or signal intelligence we have about the Russians' intentions, and it fits into the Russian worldview, okay? So despite me saying earlier that I don't think it's going to happen, I still think it's more likely. Well, in the 6 months before Russia invaded Ukraine, I decided that it was time for me to try and get some skills together. So I got my Polish gun license. I've got, I'm not going to say what kind of guns I've got or anything like that. I don't want to go into too much detail, but I did quite a lot of training. I trained with some ex-special forces guys. I trained with some ex-police instructors. So I got to a basic standard in shooting. I can tell you now, I've done probably more training than I'm going to do in the 16-day basic camp, that basic training that I'm about to have. In fact, quite a few guys that I've shot with have said like, you're going to be bored to death because it's going to be so basic, but whatever, you know, like It's good to be advanced in something if you can. I learned something about shooting though, which is to be a really good shot, you need to practice every single day. And I have way too many other things on my plate, so I'm not that interested in that. But along the way, I discovered tactical casualty combat care. So in 2025, I did a civilian 5-day first aid course. 5 days is quite a lot, right? Like in the past, I'd done it maybe 25 years ago. It's 1.5 day of first aid. So 5 days of first aid, it was the KPP thing. And it was a big eye awakener for me. Basically, I'd seen a guy have a heart attack in the street from quite some distance away. Some people were giving first aid, including chest compressions, CPR, and I didn't have a clue what to do. And I just realized, like, dude, you need to sort this out. You've got 2 children. You need to be a responsible father. You have no idea how to do any of this stuff. So that civilian thing was really interesting for me because there was a lot of pressure, a lot of stress. And then I decided to do basically the army version of it. So privately, last year, I'll put a link to the documentary I made about this, by the way. I did a 5-day military first aid course called Tactical Casualty Combat Care, TCCC. So it's a NATO standard, basically a US standard, combat lifesaver, CLS. Now that's also a 5-day course with a pretty strenuous exam. If you watch the video, I'll link to it in the notes here, you'll see a lot of gunfire, and we were using live ammunition, which is kind of cool, as well as blanks too. And you're having to do stuff like put on a tourniquet in the course of 45 seconds, make really fast decisions about whether you go for this injury or that injury, what to prioritize, because you need to change around all of the protocols. And you're doing all of this in Polish, by the way, okay? So this was in Poland in Polish. And for those of you watching this right now, I'm doing this film in English. I could just as easily do it in Polish, for sure with mistakes, but 95% of what I'm saying now I can easily say in Polish as well. And the pressure was insane. Now, I passed that CLS exam. If you're interested, I'll put a link to the guy who did it with me, Sylwester Winiarski. So basically the trainer, he was in Afghanistan. He's really, really good. And I love combat medicine. It's really cool. I never thought ever that in my mid-40s, I'd be getting interested in something like that. But I find it really, really fascinating. And for me, it's one of those few occasions I've had where I've been under such extreme pressure, you just get super tunnel vision. And I realized basically that up until I started shooting and, you know, like I've done live fire exercises where we've been maneuvering, close quarter combat, that kind of stuff. Nothing too heavy, okay? I'm no specialist, I'm no expert, but I've done enough to know that I don't know. And I've done enough to know that pressure, and I'm not talking about stress at work pressure, I'm talking about, oh, sugar bumps, someone could get killed if this goes wrong. That kind of pressure is unbelievable. And it changes you and warps you as a person. It certainly warps your perception of time. So that pressure is probably addictive, actually, I reckon. And next year, if I can, I would like to graduate at CMC level, which is full combat medic. So hopefully, once I go into the Polish Territorial Army, inshallah, I will pass, of course, and I'll tell you about that in a second. I would then go on to becoming a combat medic and probably specialize within medicine. So the physiological and psychological tests, basically it was half a day, I think, if I remember. I'm going in, I live in Warsaw, so I went to the Warsaw Recruiting Center. I'm not going to lie to you, being the only, quote, foreigner in every single group is a very awkward and uncomfortable place for me to be. There were 5 guys. I tried to break the ice a little bit. Polish men are not known for ice-breaking conversations, but by the end of the day, because basically they take you in batches, right? So it was 5, 5, 5, 5. There was a 19-year-old guy who was getting his reassessment done, I think. He'd already been in VOT, so it was useful talking to him. And there were 3 or 4 other guys who we ended up actually having a bit of banter with. So I'm not going to go into too much detail because I'm not sure what's confidential and what's not. And the Army are very big on making sure that you don't talk about too much. But the psychological test, you can kind of guess what it was. It was an interview with some computer-based tests. The physiological test was with a doctor. He was kind of cool because he was that classic Polish 60s kind of doctor. You know, once you talk to him a little bit, it was fun. There were some physical examinations, which I'm not going to go into too much detail. I talked about them on a Polish podcast recently, but I did have to cough whilst my man was cupping, if you know what I mean. But I got category A, which means that I'm physically fit, and I got passed to go into the basic training, which, as I say, is 16 days, and it's going to happen for me from the 5th of September all the way through to the 20th of September. More about that in a sec. So everything was going absolutely fine with my training. I was crushing it in training, getting faster and faster in my runs, doing more and more press-ups and pull-ups. But I've had this recurring back injury which I got last year basically when I was going through a lot of stress. And I always had these little back pains when I was stressed and tired. And basically about 2 weeks ago, I started getting this little shoulder pain as well. So I eased off all the training. I'm not stupid. I'm still doing my runs and things like that. And I've been to see a chiropractor, and he basically has said to me, you need to stop training straight away. Lots of, I don't want to go into too much detail, but I'm a bit wonky. My hips are a little bit wonky as well. I think it's been a lifelong, maybe genetic problem, which is showing up now, maybe because I've trained too much. But I try to always train, you know, reasonably, basically, half an hour a day, that kind of thing, maybe 5 days a week. So 10 weeks before I go in, I've had this kind of crushing blow. When I got out of the office, this guy with the chiropractor's office, and I drove to my summer house on Friday, I'm basically like slightly in tears because I've tried so hard to be in the best possible condition for this basic training. Now, I'm not worried because I'm in great shape. So if I have to do 20, 30 press-ups, I reckon I'll be able to do that in 10 weeks' time. I need to give my body the chance to heal. But it's a reminder to me that I'm in my mid-40s, I'm not in my 20s, so this is a different kind of experience for me. Before I finish this, I want to tell you, of course, if you want to support me, you can come and see me on the 20th of September. There'll be my passing out. If I make it, I'll be there, and I'll be swearing my oath to Poland. But I want to talk about my motivations for doing this. In my opinion, as a new Polish citizen, I have a debt to repay my nation. I want to show Poles and Poland that I am worthy of their citizenship. I also have a huge amount of respect for those who fought in the past for Poland's independence and for its sovereignty, and I want to follow in their line, essentially. I also want to be able to look my own children in the eye and say to them and feel really that I did everything to protect them. I do believe that a nation is a family of families. Poland is my family. I feel a part of the Polish family, and I want to show my family that I love them and I care for them, and I want to be there for them if anything bad ever does happen. But I'm not going to lie to you either. As a father of 2 daughters, there's also a little part of me that just loves the masculinity, the teamwork, the training. You don't get that really in any kind of professional environment outside of the army, outside of certain professions like combat medicine as well. I just absolutely love working in teams. And frankly speaking, the other thing is me being out of my comfort zone as well, because everything's in Polish. No one cares if you're a foreigner. No one gives a monkeys about your backstory. You have to perform, you have to deliver. And I've proven to myself with the combat medic stuff that I can deliver under pressure. I even captained our team in the last medical competitions that we had. So I did some one-day stuff with a great team. And they're like, you're going to be in charge. I'm like, what the hell? I can barely say a word, you know, especially under pressure. So I'm always trying to prove myself to myself. I'm always trying to push myself that little bit harder. And every single time I get comfortable, I want to do just a little bit more. But I'll tell you something else as well. I just have a feeling this is the right thing to do. And I can't explain it. I love this country. And, you know, I'll tell you now, actually, there was a guy once, he wrote on Facebook, I even kept the comment, he says, nie pójdziesz z nami do walki. You won't fight with us. And I was so frustrated by that comment, you know. I'm like, F you don't know who I am, you know nothing about my love for this country. I love this place, and I would fight for this country if needs come. And I know many people like me who say that, by the way. There's nothing unusual. And I thought, like, I'll prove to you that you're wrong. So in a way, this is my answer to that weird Facebook comment I got 10 years ago, which is, well, look now, buddy, who's doing more for this country and who would do more for this country. So it's not about proving anything to anyone, but I guess it is about proving something to myself, which is I said I would do this, I made that promise, and now I'm keeping it. So if you would like to support me in this crazy mission, it's really, really simple. My passing out, inshallah, this actually goes well, okay? So God willing, I actually make my way through this basic training. On the 20th of September, the 18th Brigade, the City Brigade of Warsaw, will have its passing out for my unit, or my group of people going through, and I'll be there. And I'm going to invite absolutely everybody because it's going to be a very special moment for me, and I'll have my mates with cameras and stuff like that. If you would like to find out more, just follow my channel, okay? And I'll do a little video basically in a free moment if I can, and I'll let you know when and where if you're in Warsaw. And if you're not, well, you can just subscribe to this channel as well. It would really help me out and appreciate it. So I'll let you know more about what joining the Polish Army was like. I'll definitely do videos as well in Polish for those Poles that are watching me on my other channel, which is Patrick Ney po polsku. And it's been a real pleasure recording this for you. See you soon.